I'm going to speak briefly now and then be long-winded later, but wanted to kick us off quick and speedy. First, I'd like to thank the Marseille, the building we are having our meeting in, and I always say this wrong. It's not Wish Fish, it's Wish Fish. West Side Federation for Senior Supportive Housing and Supportive Housing, for allowing us to have our meeting here. It's very gracious about giving us space. I'd also like to announce that when you came in, you may have noticed there are compost buckets out on the table where you may have signed in. Those are free. If you need a compost bucket, please feel free to take one. They were given to us by City Council member Sean Abreu, and we are then distributing them to anybody who needs them. All right, so that's just about everything I wanted to say at this moment. I'm going to turn the mic over to our newly elected New York State Assembly member, Michael Lasher, who has the distinction of having grown up in the neighborhood. I remember meeting his mom on my way to work one morning. I don't think we've ever had an elected official whose mother campaigns for him at the subway. Michael.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Heather. It's great to be here with all of you and the Block Association that was for a time my Block Association. And my mom is here, I should say. My mom's Stephanie Walsh, who I will confess after 30 years being a member of this Block Association, we pulled her down to my building at 91st and Riverside. So I pulled her away from this wonderful area in our neighborhood. And I also recognize my chief of staff, Claire Botnick, is here, and she is doing an amazing job leading our team in the office. And you know, I should say, whether it's because I grew up for a chunk of my youth at 103rd and West End, or because our office is at 104th between Broadway and West End, I find that a lot of the work that we are doing locally is kind of right in this part of the district. And I have to remind myself the district runs from 80th Street to 125th Street, and we gotta make sure to hit the southern and northern parts of that terrain as well. I'll just spend a couple minutes just giving you an overview of the work that we've been doing in the first few months in office, and we'd be grateful for any questions you have. Locally, I was very pleased. We have Ira and team here. I was very pleased to be part of the enormous, exciting progress that's been made with the Metro Theater and the purchase of the Metro Theater by the Upper West Side Cinema Center, which was supported by $4 million in state funding. Senator Hoyland Siegel contributed $500,000, and I went to the governor and received another $3.5 million to support that purchase. And I'm extremely excited about the prospect of bringing the Metro Theater back to life. 20 years of dereliction, and it's just enormously exciting what that would mean for the neighborhood. I am extremely focused on getting the scaffolding down at 104th Street and Broadway, which has been up, I think, almost for exactly 1/2 of the time the Metro Theater has been shuttered. We have to. That is, and you know, it's a Kafkaesque tale of 4 different city agencies, all blaming one another. And Councilman Abreu and I, about a month ago, sent a letter to the city asking for basically a multi-agency task force to convene with us to get this down. And the city responded by publicly announcing that scaffolding would come down in June, which is good. But just as with the Metro Theater, that site has been there's just been a history of deadlines set and blown and whatnot. And so we didn't jump for joy at that news, but we insisted nonetheless on the meeting that we had sought with all the city agencies. It came together. There were more than a dozen city officials from 4 different agencies. to their credit, they took us through in rather exhaustive detail, status on the site, the challenges they face, where they're at. And as we sort of dug into it, at one point in the call, I sort of said, hey guys, does anybody here really think the scaffolding is coming down in June? So I think in the department of setting realistic expectations while being a vigorous advocate for the neighborhood, I would say that I think it is, I'm cautiously optimistic that the scaffolding will come down this summer. And we will stay on them. So what I said to them at the end of the meeting is, we would like to meet with you every 2 or 3 weeks until the scaffolding comes down. So we have our next meeting next week, and we're just gonna stay on top of them and be politely belligerent and until the scaffolding comes down. So those are 2 issues that are kind of right in this neighborhood that we're focused on. I should also mention, enormous public safety challenges at Douglas houses. And part of that is that the low staffing for the PSA 6, the part of the police department that's responsible for Douglas houses, has been basically, they were basically emptied out a year ago and have not been, there are at this moment, I believe, still no dedicated NYPD personnel to Douglas houses as there used to be. And so we are in the process of setting up a meeting with PSA 6 it's not their fault. It's a police department personnel issue to advocate on behalf of PSA 6 and the residents of Douglas House, this neighborhood, for more police personnel for that purpose. So those are a few of the very local issues. I will say, obviously, I came into office at a very strange and difficult and challenging time to be in government and in politics. This is, I know, a nonpartisan group, but I will certainly just say that I feel that the assault on our core democratic institutions and values that is happening in Washington is, as much as anything, I think, an assault on much that makes New York what it is, and even if you aren't outraged and angry about the values that are animating that assault and our values that are coming under attack, you should be very concerned about what it is going to mean for the economic health of the state and city of New York. And so I have sort of decided, sometimes you come into office and you pick an issue that you're going to be, that's going to be your thing. I certainly had ideas about that when I was running and hawking my literature at the subway stations. But that, sort of to some extent, that's fallen by the wayside. And I've decided that sort of my issue is going to be, how do we use state power to protect New Yorkers, respond, and fight back to what is coming out of Washington. And so that's. So I literally wake up every morning thinking about what, particularly on the legislative front, what we should be doing legislatively. I've introduced a series of bills aimed at this particular, with this particular goal in mind. And I think of it in 3 categories. The first category is, how do we protect the rights of New Yorkers? And so I just, the weeks merge in my mind. I think it was earlier this week, introduced legislation to make our hospitals, healthcare institutions, schools, houses of worship, government offices, libraries, all of the kind of core civic shared spaces, communal spaces, off limits to administrative arrests by federal immigration authorities. And there's a host of other bills that I am a co-sponsor of in that category, protecting people's rights. I have then thought a lot about what are the areas where the state government can step in to do work protecting and advocating for the interests of residents that the federal government used to do but will no longer do. So, for example, the federal government under the Fair Housing Act of 1968 prevents and punishes housing discrimination. Well, Donald Trump in the 1970s was one of the first defendants of a housing discrimination case by the federal government. So he's never been a big fan of the Fair Housing Act of 1968. We can give the state all of the legal power that's vested in the federal government to enforce against housing discrimination, and I introduced a bill to do just that. I've introduced legislation to expand the Attorney General's authority to enforce around consumer protection and consumer fraud, which is what the CFPB had been doing until Donald Trump shut the lights off there. And just this week, I introduced legislation called the GRIFT Act, which is government response to insider fraud and trading, to expand the Attorney General and Department of Financial Services authority to investigate and take action against financial fraud and securities fraud. You may have seen that when Trump pulled back the tariffs, there was a bubble of trading that occurred in the hour or two preceding it. I don't think we can expect much from the Trump SEC, and I certainly don't think we expect much from the Trump SEC when the misconduct is happening by their bosses. So that is that's some of the legislation I put in that sort of second category. Where can we fill in the gaps? And then the last category is really how do we strategically fight back? And there are a number of bills that I put in there, but the most significant one is called the Recourse Act, which would allow the state of New York, upon the joint and unanimous decision of the governor and the controller and the budget director, to withhold payments to the federal government in the event that, in contravention of a court order, the federal government withholds payments to the state of New York. And so that is just, there are many more than this, and there are a host of bills that are not related, I should say, to what's happening in Washington. But I just think we need now to be as creative, as strategic as we can, and states have a lot of power. We can't solve it all, and any forthright discussion of this, we cannot, the federal government, we are seeing the enormous power of the federal government when it is used without any regard to fairness or democratic norms, and it is scary. And I would not begin to put anybody at ease that the state of New York can stop all of that. But I think there are meaningful things that we can do, that we should do, to fight back and do as much as we can to hold on to as much of our democracy as we can, as much of our state and our cities' core social fabric as we can, so that when the day comes when these people are out of office, that we still have something to hold on to and to build upon and build back. So that's what I'm working on. And you know, we're also trying to get a state budget. I think that'll happen in the next week or two. I don't think it'll be a great, I don't think there is a great deal of news that's going to be in that state budget. I expect reasonable compromises on most of the high profile issues related to public safety and mental health that have been talked about. I think financially it's going to be a fairly not particularly exciting budget. I think we'll probably back up in the fall to deal with cuts that will come from the federal government, but that's not something that's really being dealt with in this year's budget. So that's more rambling than I wanted to do, but hopefully give you a little bit of overview. And I will say, as I always do, it is just the most extraordinary privilege to represent this community. I think it is one of the, you know, I believe it's one of the great places in the world to live and raise a family. I'm so privileged to do it. So representing you all is just the most wonderful thing. And our office, as I said, is just on 104th between Broadway and West End. If you have anything that we can be of service to you on, a challenge you're facing, something you think we should be more focused on, give us a call, email, or just stop by. So thank you all very much. I'd be grateful to take any questions that you have. Yes, please.
Yeah. Now, trying to interfere in congested pricing.
Yes.
Which I think is a really, really good thing for the city. And is there anything that the legislature can do to help the governor? The governor is really fine, and I appreciate that. But is there anything the legislature can do that keeps Mr. Orange Head out?
Yeah, look, I think it's a good question. I think that I think, you know, if you look at all the standards that I can see you, I think in all of the various fights that are playing out, I actually think our legal odds on congestion pricing are very high. I think there are a variety of reasons. I don't know if you saw it today, by the way. This is the most unbelievable thing. I mean, the good news is these guys in Washington, they're awful. They're not particularly competent. Just today, they made a court filing on the congestion pricing case, public court filing, that appears to have been an internal memo from their lawyers to the Department of Transportation. And the memo basically says, here's why we've got a weak case. And they literally, like, they must have copy and pasted the wrong thing on the letterhead and filed it with the court. I mean, literally, that's what seems to happen.
So, do you think that how much do you think the congestion pricing should come down?
What do you mean? What?
Well, you said you thought it was right.
No, I'm sorry. I thought that the odds of the state's success in the legal fight are high. I think that the federal government has a weak case. I think fundamentally we control the switch, and possession is 9/10 of the law. And so it's not, this is not a situation where the state has to go get a court to tell the federal government to do something for us. This is a case where the federal government has to get a court to tell the state to turn the lights on, the cameras on, really. And I just don't think that, I think the odds of that happening, I think the merits are not on their side, and I think it's unlikely that that's going to happen. So I think we're in pretty good shape on that. I will just say, just as a quick segue, what is happening now in Albany as part of the budget, perhaps the most important part of the budget, is the next MTA capital plan. Congestion pricing actually is a funding element of the MTA's capital plan that ended in 2024 and was financed in part against the projected revenue of congestion pricing. There is now the next 5-year capital plan, 2025 through 2029, is being funded in this year's budget, should be funded this year's budget. And it's about a $65 billion capital plan. I will say 3 things about this. Number one, it's vitally important that we fund the MTA capital plan. Vitally important. That has been a priority of mine. And there is strikingly, you would be appalled by how few legislators actually care about that, I would say.
I don't understand.
Well, I think it is legislators from Manhattan and the more densely populated parts of the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Queens. But beyond that, it is really not a priority for folks. And the suburbs, for which Metro North and Long Island Railroad is a lifeblood, have an anti-MTA ethos that is really disturbing. So, but notwithstanding that, I think it's going to happen, and that's important, and that's a good thing, and it would be a disaster for us. Second thing I'll say about it is, it's 2/3 of what it should be. Okay, we should be funding a $100 billion MTA capital, and we're not. And if we really want a world-class transit system, that's what it would take. And the fight for a truly robust investment in the MTA's capital needs is a long-term fight, and one we need to work on. And the third thing I'll say, and it's related to both the first 2 things, is that while we have not been fully briefed on the details of how this is being funded, I expect with dismay that it is going to be funded almost entirely on the backs of New York City-based employers through an increase in what's known as the payroll mobility tax, but limited in practice, if not explicitly, to New York City-based employers. The last time they needed funding for the MTA, it was explicitly limited to New York City-based employers. This time I expect it will not be quite as explicit, but practically the same, and that is wrong. And both, I am troubled, frankly, both by the insufficiency of the capital plan, and by the way, we're funding it. It's a regional system, it should be funded regionally. The quandary that somebody like me faces is the first point, which is, I'm damn glad we're funding the capital plan. And there's a little bit of an element of, it's not what it should be, and it's not being funded the right way, but it's happening. So I think that from my perspective, we have a 5-year project now, which is that when this comes up in 5 years, that we really get the full boat of investment funded regionally. Other questions? Shelley?
What in the proposed budget is happening with affordable housing?
That is still being discussed. I think we will see an array of capital investments made, capital pots being put aside for various and sundry forms of, for which I think there'll be capital support for Mitchell-Lama. I think there'll be capital support for public housing. I introduced legislation to create a public revolving loan fund for mixed income housing to provide mezzanine financing and thereby increase the number of low income and middle income units you get in mixed income projects. That was included in the governor's executive budget, but only for outside of New York City. So I'm trying to incorporate New York. The thinking was the city was going to follow suit. It looks like that's now not going to happen. So I'm trying to get that, get the city included in that. I think we will see a reduction in the shelter rent tax for Mitchell-Lamas from 10% to 5%. I have legislation to get it down to 0. I think that'll be a next year project. I think there is a sliver of hope around housing access vouchers. So I think you will see an array of things in the budget around affordable housing. I don't think it is going to be a headline maker in the housing space budget this year. Sir.
I just want to give a suggestion. I don't know how many people here ever listened to MSNBC with Rachel Maddow. She just did a thing opening up people's eyes that you wouldn't think were really happening. And mostly because of the Trump administration proposing various cuts and for here and there, and then he would renege on it. So Rachel said the best word for everything that he is doing is oops, which is OOOPS. And it was hilarious, but so sad. And that's what's causing all the furor going on with the stock market and all. He's just working for his big buddies so they can make money on the stock market. Yeah. And it trickles down to a number of the things that they don't care.
No, absolutely. I mean, by the way, one of the bills that we put in would change the way the state calculates corporate income tax to capture international profit shifting. So we lose, the state of New York loses about $750 million a year to multinational corporations shifting profits to overseas subsidiaries and affiliates. And so we could generate about $750 million a year, not even by raising anybody's tax rates, simply by changing the way we calculate that to capture that money back. And that is something, as we are facing the likelihood of significant federal cuts, I think would be a very sensible place to start in finding some money to ease the pain. Rich?
So you talked about how individuals are under attack. Also, we've seen our institutions under attack, especially universities and law firms. I'm wondering what more can be done to protect those that are under attack, but also to make clear that there are consequences for the ones that cave. Just today, 16 congressmen wrote to the law firms that promised pro bono work for Trump, saying that that's effectively bribery, that they're offering something of value to Trump in exchange for him either issuing or not issuing an executive order that can have great consequences and material consequences to their business. I'm wondering if there's anything more needed for New York State, if we already have anti-bribery laws that would cover this, or if there are more laws that would be needed that could be used to prosecute law firms that do try to bribe.
It's a good question. It's interesting. We had a town hall last night and I was asked a similar question. I don't have a clear answer for you at this moment. It's something I've been thinking about. I will tell you, I think I make a bit of a distinction between the private for-profit institutions like law firms and nonprofit institutions like hospitals and universities. Not that some of those, the latter category institutions have not, disgraced themselves. But I am more sympathetic to the situation in which our our institutions of higher education and healthcare find themselves, because, look, what Trump is setting out to do is break liberal institutions, right? And he is putting them in an impossible situation of existential economic damage or existential values damage, right? And I think while I certainly admire what Harvard has done and wish that every university follows suit, I am hesitant to pile on to institutions that are struggling, perhaps acting with less courage, perhaps having less access to endowment funds than Harvard has. I'm a little hesitant to pile on with additional consequences, even if I might.
Those would fall on the protect side of my question.
Yeah, so the short answer is it's an issue I'm thinking about. I think the question of whether we have legal tools to kind of go after the private and for-profit institutions that are engaging in that kind of quid pro quo with Trump is a good thought that I had not had. So I think on that one, I will say, stay tuned, and I'm going to keep thinking about it and maybe back to you. Please.
First, I just want to say you're a breath of fresh air. Thank you. I'm wondering about environmental issues and the state government and where our state and our city stand in terms of being able to maintain the direction we've been going in it, even at a snail's pace.
It's a really good question. I'm going to answer that on two topics. First, the question of environmental protection in terms of, and then on the question about climate goals. Some of the earliest explorations I did on the filling in the gaps category of kind of Trump response was focused on environmental protection, because obviously you've got the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, all this body of federal law that has been the core of protecting our environment for my entire lifetime. And our initial thought was, boy, there are going to be huge gaps to fill that state agencies like the Department of Environmental Conservation, like the Attorney General's office, could fill. And what we discovered was that really New York State has actually over time done an excellent job of embodying in state law all the protections of federal law and then some. And so in fact, the statute, there really are, the good news is that even as the Fed shut down all the kind of environmental protection mechanisms of the federal government from a legal and statutory perspective, there aren't going to be significant gaps in New York. So that's the good news. In terms of the resources that our agencies have to do that enforcement work in the absence of federal work, I need to get a better handle on how much actual kind of work was being done by the federal agencies that will now need to get picked up by the state agencies, and whether that creates staffing need and funding need, et cetera. But from a legal and statutory perspective, everybody I've spoken to suggests that we're reasonably well covered. On our climate goals, state has very ambitious climate goals, and we have, as you said, been moving at a snail's pace, and you see that both in actually the level of carbon emissions. We are nowhere by every metric in terms of how we are doing in meeting the goals of the state's climate law in terms of emissions reduction, electrification, electric vehicle deployment. I mean, pick a metric, we're doing poorly. And that is correlated to the fact that we are moving very slowly on implementing the core tool, the biggest lever identified in the state's climate plans, which is what's known as a cap and invest program, which would basically set a legal limit on carbon emissions from within the state. That limit would decline year after year. The emissions that do happen would have a charge attached to them. The revenue from that, the payment of that charge, which would be significant, billions and billions of dollars every year, would be invested into renewable energy sources. Those renewable energy sources in turn would make it more feasible and economical to continue emissions reduction. And the idea is you create a flywheel. The regulations of that program were supposed to be implemented by, I believe, the end of 2024. It might even be the end of 2023, and they're nowhere in sight. And I think that is a practical matter. It is a political judgment that the governor is making. I think it is, it may be the right political judgment. I think it is the wrong substantive. And we should, I believe and have said publicly that we should move with speed to get that program on the books and get it happening. It is going to come with some economic pain, I should say. Like, I think that the political analysis the governor has made that there is going to be sticker shock attached to this program is correct. And I think that sticker shock is going to be greatest in the suburbs and the place where swing voters live. So I don't think she's wrong politically to have some hesitation about it. And I think that we should be smart and thoughtful about how we can reduce that sticker shock and reduce the political cost of implementing what is a very important program. But I think we should do this all quickly. Sir?
There's a little bit of issue here. We mentioned the sheds
Yes.
and 104. There's two real contributing factors. I lived at 885 West End. Our building had major work that had to be done. The cost of that is going from somewhere around 3 million, close to 5 million. And a big part of that reason is they cause tremendous economic harm to buildings. Specifically, they require that you replace material with the same material. Our building needs terracotta work and parapets on the top. That's not available. It's well over a year, it was one, it still hasn't come in, but yet there are other companies here that can provide comparable material quickly and at a lower cost. So we're paying every day for that shit. We're paying the electric bill, and the quality of life is lower. Plus, I'm paying now $500 a month a year. On top of an assessment, this is the second assessment for the repair, and a good part of that is due to the landlord.
Yeah.
The second issue is there is no working setup in the city where if the shed has to go up and the contractor is hired, some city division to meet with them, how long is it gonna take? You can't put up a shed and then the contractor starts 4 months later. There has to be a time limit for the contractor and for the shed, and if they're gonna exceed it, there are penalties unless they can come forward and say, we have to extend it. There is nothing. This is part of the reason why the Upper West Side is a shed town.
So.
Can I just interrupt? There are a few people online who are unable to hear the question. Can you summarize the question?
Okay, I will badly summarize the question. The question referred to the proliferation of sidewalk sheds and the specific problems that are created by the Landmarks Commission in their requirements, and the extent to which that adds to delays, as well as the delays that occur when contractors get signed up and the incentive structure around it. Let me say 3 things about this. First of all, I hate to say this, but it feels like I'm kicking the can. But there are some problems that are more state issues, and there are some. This is the issue for all of us who live here. The tools to fix it mostly lie with city government. Landmarks, I cannot legislate the Landmarks Commission. I guess in theory under the New York State Constitution, we could reach in and start talking about it, but really that is a matter for the city council. I agree with you in general. Second thing I'd say specifically, if I were to make, and to the city council credit, they did just pass a number of bills aimed at tackling this problem. I don't think they in the main got the landmarks issues, and what they did not do, and I think that this is the single biggest thing the city could do, and I said this, is to lengthen the inspection cycle around local law 11. So we have a 5-year inspection cycle on local law 11. Paris, whose buildings are many centuries older than ours, have a 10-year inspection cycle. And last I checked, there is not a rampant problem of people being hit by items falling off facades in Paris. And so if the city could do one thing to deal with this, on top of all the issues you raised, would be to lengthen the inspection cycle. The third thing I'll say is, I have introduced legislation, this gets sort of to the last point you raised, that is called the Restore Act. And what the Restore Act would do is it would create a property tax abatement for buildings that can do facade work and get their scaffolding up and down quickly. And at a certain point of delay, it creates a property tax penalty. And the idea, in addition to providing financial relief to buildings that are good actors and penalties for those, and most of the most long-lasting scaffolding, like I say, are not co-ops, right? When you're looking at scaffolding up for 3 or 4 years, by and large, those are rental buildings and an economic decision being made by the owner of the rental building that it's cheaper to leave the scaffolding than to do the repair. So this bill is enough to change that economic equation. The other thing it's aimed at doing is to say to buildings to create an incentive, because of the contractor issue you raised. When I've spoken to people, my understanding is, what a lot of times what happens is you hit up against the local law 11 deadline. You have to do the inspection. The inspection finds an unsafe condition. Sidewalk shed has to go up within 24 hours. And now you're bidding out the contractor. The contractor may not be ready to do the work. There may be supply chain issues, and next thing you know, a year passes. As opposed to, if you have an incentive to proactively maintain your facade, do facade work before there's an unsafe condition, then you can reach out to a contractor, you can survey the building before there's an unsafe condition, line up the contractor can get the materials, the workers lined up, and then the sidewalk shed goes up and the work begins immediately. And it all happens very quickly. And under my bill, in that situation, the building would basically get 50% of the cost will come off the property tax bill. So my legislation is sort of the one area where I thought there could be a state intervention, but none of this problem has to be dealt with by the city council. Yes, please.
Okay, one more question. Is there anything, since you brought up landlords, that can be done that are landlords emptying places of businesses that are very, very active and leaving them empty for months,
Yes.
years.
Yeah.
I mean, and getting paid for it, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the state, they get paid some kind of minor fee for,
Not really. Well, let me, so the question was, can we do some, the question really was, can we do some commercial vacancies? I will say that, I think the problem, landlords are certainly not compensated for leaving stores vacant. There is some perverse incentive built into the way that buildings are financed, the way that owners can borrow against their buildings that can, in certain circumstances, make it make sense to leave a storefront vacant. But I think as I've looked into this more, I think as I've looked into this more, the nub of this problem is that commercial. So if you have a residential a market rate rental residential vacancy, right? The tenant leaves, that apartment is going to be re-rented for the next month. There will be a line of people out the door looking to rent that apartment on a 1-year lease, and that apartment will be rented monthly. And we have like a 1%, less than 1% residential vacancy rate. So, right now, why doesn't that happen with commercial properties? Well, one reason is that retail is in upheaval because of technology and world, COVID, these things. But the other reason is that the market standard around commercial leases are 5-year leases, 10-year leases, with generally a substantial amount of upfront investment in the property by either the landlord or the tenant. And so it's just a much bigger commitment. It's the difference between going on a first date and get married. And so the business leaves because businesses close And then it takes a long time for the property to lease up. I don't have a simple answer.
And Newton raised rents so high.
They do, but again, at the end of the day, it is not actually in the landlord's interest to not have rent on the property. It's not, I have to, I just, you know, I try to figure out what the actual problem is. And it's not that the landlords want these properties to be vacant, it's that there's a lot of friction in that market. The question that I don't have an answer to for you tonight is what can we do to ease that friction? Is it about providing, you know, I've thought about the idea of providing subsidies or tax abatements for landlords that do short-term leases to independent businesses or that sort of thing. And I don't have an answer for you tonight. It's a problem I think a lot of. Let me take this last question and then I think I'm gonna take my leave. Please, yeah.
So to piggyback on this topic, the Small Business Protection Act has been languishing in the city council for years, blocked by Gail Brewer, blocked by the landlords. It's a good bill. Maybe it should be updated, but let's get that passed. That will really address at least some of these issues. Take a look at the language of it.
I appreciate that. And, you know, again, that is a matter of the city council. I take the point. It's not a bill that I've studied closely, but I will. Well, again, I don't have a vote on it. You know, I will. I will. All right. Well, listen. Thank you all so much for being here, for taking the time. If anything we can do, please not hesitate to call us. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Those up for some good times.
No, great.
I neglected something when we kicked off the meeting. I didn't introduce myself. I'm Hetty Campbell. I'm the current chair of the Block Association. Moving along with our agenda, the next item is the Upper West Side Cinema Center, commonly known as Metro Theater. We're getting it back. So here's Ira Deutschman and Beth Krieger to talk to us about what's going on at the Metro. I don't see anybody here tonight with big sacks of money, but go find your big sacks of money and pass them to Ira.
And then I'm gonna go to Mexico. So yeah, I'm Ira Deutschman. I'm the president of Upper West Side Cinema Center. And the two ladies that are handing out these flyers are my compatriots in this endeavor. Adeline Montier and I both come from the film world, and from the distribution, marketing, etc. So we've been in the movie business for a long time. And Beth Krieger, who also happens to be my wife, used to work at the Calhoun School, so some of you may have had some intersection with her, but she's been working with us in the development and communications area. We've been told to keep this to 5 minutes. I'm going to be very, very brief and leave some time for questions. First off, I want to give a huge thank you to Michael Lasher. You know, we did an amazing job of fundraising to buy the building, but without Micah's intervention, we never would have gotten to the finish line. So, so a huge thank you to him. Second big thank you is to this block association. There are people in the room who individually gave money to our efforts very early on, and this block association gave money to us very early on. And that was such a vote of confidence, given how many disappointments there have been over the years in terms of announcements that were made about things that were going to happen in that building, and then they ended up falling apart. So I have to say that, you know, it's a wonderful thing that we've had so much support from this neighborhood. At this time, we're approaching 600 individual donors who are from 10025. And that's, you know, anything from a $5 donation up to tens of thousands of dollars. It's like all over the map. So thank you. The plan, now that we own this, the building, is to build a 5-screen art house cinema in it. The idea is to do something along the lines of what the Lincoln Plaza used to be, where within the 5 screens, one of them would be dedicated to things like film festivals, special events, restored classic films, etc. 3 of the screens would be first-run art house theaters, playing the kinds of films that currently have no home on the Upper West Side. There are films that play down in the Village, they play at the Angelica, they play at the IFC Center, they play at Film Forum, but there's really no place for them on the Upper West Side. And then the 5th screen is, we're calling it the Education Center. It's actually not going to be a ticketed event venue. It's going to be a space that's available for community events, for an educational program that is going to be developed by Adeline. She currently, by the way, is doing a very similar thing for Film at Lincoln Center, which she's using as the laboratory to try to figure out what sorts of educational programs actually work, and then she's going to bring that all to our venue. And in the lobby is going to be a cafe that's going to be open morning, noon, and night. Breakfast, coffee, lunch, cocktails. We're convinced we'll be able to get a liquor license with no problem, because when the Alamo Draft House was going to go into that building, they got a liquor license. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to get one as well. You know, a martini and a movie go really well together, for those of you who have tried it. You can sample a little bit of our programming this summer. I know it sounds crazy to say this because we don't have a theater yet, but we're doing a series of films in other neighborhood theaters. We're working with Symphony Space, with the JCC, with the Maisels Documentary Center, with JCC Harlem, doing screenings, you know, on the theme of cinema. It's going to be movies about movies. And the idea is to get everybody in this neighborhood sparked up about what's coming. So the questions, I'll start off the question and answer part of this by asking the questions you're going to ask. The first one is, how long is it going to take to open the theater, right? Who's going to ask that? Sure. Okay. Yeah. And the answer is, we can't tell you for sure because we don't want to disappoint you. I'm estimating between 2 and 3 years. Some people tell me that's overly optimistic, but I can tell you that myself and our entire team are committed to doing it as fast as possible. We are working with city agencies, with the Landmarks Commission, which I know they took a little bit of heat today, but they're actually working very closely with us to make sure that we're going to be able to grease the wheels to get things going as quickly as possible. A lot of you are probably wondering about the condition of the building. I promise you that we did our due diligence before we bought it. We had inspectors go in to make sure that it was structurally sound. We had inspectors inspect the facade to make sure it was going to be repairable. And it's actually, the terracotta tiles are actually in pretty good shape. They need a little bit of tender loving care. There's some chips in it here and there that need to be repaired. And a little bit of buffing. There's I don't know if you are all familiar with it close enough to, but there's a metal thing that goes up the center. Right now, you would never know it was metal because it's like a really dark color. Apparently it's rusted. That's going to be easily cleaned up and nice. The marquee is in very, very bad shape. That's the reason why those poles are there holding it up, because they were worried it was literally going to fall down. We're going to have to rebuild the marquee. We're going to try to make it look as close to the original marquee as possible, which actually isn't what it looked like recently, because the building was built in 1933, and the marquee that's up there right now was actually built in the 1990s. So we're going to try to go back to what it originally looked like. How much is all this going to cost? That's another question I'm sure somebody was going to ask. And while we're only dealing with estimates right this second, we're told pretty pretty securely that it's gonna be somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 million. Now, that sounds like a lot of money for us to raise, and we're gonna have to raise that money before we really get deep into the construction. But reality is that for cultural organizations in the city, $300 million for the Children's Museum, and they're moving ahead with it. The Joyce Theater raised $40 million. So in a way, the question should be, how are we getting off so cheap? I mean, the fact is, it's a much smaller project. You know, and one of the great things about the building is that it's empty. They've done the demolition work for us already. So it's really 4 walls that's like a canvas waiting to be built. So those are the questions I thought you were all going to be interested in hearing about. Do you have any other questions? Oh, yes. Yeah.
It's been a long time since I've been inside that building, but why 5 screens? It seems like a lot for that space.
It's a great question. Adeline and I are both members of an organization called the Art House Convergence. It's a group of over 800 people who work in the art house sector in the United States. The majority of them are not-for-profits for really good reason. We're a not-for-profit, in case I forgot to say that. And the common wisdom based on years of research is that number of screens is more important than number of seats, because it gives you flexibility in your programming, where you can have many things going on at the same time. And as a result, if some things are not selling tickets, other things are. Or because they're various sizes, you can move things around in the complex depending on the demand. So if something's doing really, really well, you can move it up to a larger theater. If it's not doing so well, you can move it down to a smaller theater. And because most projection is done digitally these days, it's not like you're hauling cans of film from one booth to another. It's literally a flip of a switch to move from one theater to another. So that's the reason. If you ask anybody who works in one of the peer institutions that we have around the country, places like the Jacob Burns Film Center up in Pleasantville, for those of you who are familiar with that one, where there's a Coolidge Corner up in Cambridge, not Cambridge, Brookline, thank you, in Brookline, Massachusetts. These are organizations that have been doing this for years and years, and we've been studying their business models. If you ask them what's the sweet spot for an art house theater, they all say 5 screens. Yeah, if you're worried about them being really tiny theaters, the largest screen is going to be about 190 seats. The second largest screen is about 165 seats. And then there's 3 screens, including the education center, that hold just under 50. And so they're not going to be tiny places like they were going to build in the last version of what was going to be done in the metro. And we're absolutely committed to state-of-the-art sound projection. That's going to be a very, very high priority.
All George Soros.
Sorry, what?
All Mr. Soros.
Mr. Soros, yeah. Yeah, well, we do have a connection. Yes.
Obviously, a lot of money is needed to build it and to buy the theater and then build it out. Is there an expectation that it'll be self-supporting?
Yes. We wouldn't be doing it otherwise. We actually had a business plan in place long before we knew the metro was going to become available to us, because we knew the Upper West Side needed an art house. There was a definite gap that needed to be filled. So we actually built a business plan around that, and we've been working on it for years before the metro became available to us. We just had to adapt some of the numbers. I've shown our business plan to these other art houses. By the way, they're all, unlike the competitive business world, all the not-for-profit art houses cooperate with each other. And I asked them to look at all of my projections and numbers, and they think I'm under-projecting revenue. I think we can be self-sufficient within the first year. That may sound like it's ridiculous, but the model proves itself out in other places in the country. If they can make this work in Nashville, the Belcourt Theater in Nashville is another one of our model theaters. We can make it work on the Upper West Side. Yeah.
Do you have an architect lined up already?
Yes. It's called Voight and McTavish. If you look at our website, you can see the sketches, their concept drawings at this point. now that we've owned the building for 2 weeks now, now that we own it, they can go in and do what they call a laser scan in order to do a much more detailed plan. So that's going to happen over the next couple of months.
I've lived here about 25 years, so I used to go to the metro very often. There were only 2 screens in the theater there. And I'm just wondering, trying to recall the interior of the plaza that was near Lincoln's Center,
Lincoln Plaza.
which fluctuated as far as the size of the screens. And would that be similar to that? Or can you build higher on this theater? Is that allowed?
We cannot build any higher. The air rights were sold to the building next door. You know that really tall, super tall building that's right next door? Yeah. They're. Sorry. Yeah. No. It's literally on Broadway next to the metro. It's a super tall building. It actually looks out of place because it's really higher than anything else around it. And those people are living in the air rights that used to belong to the metro.
39 stories.
Yeah, it's 39 stories. So those air rights are gone. We cannot build any higher than the building currently is. Yes.
I was just curious, what's going on with the Thalia?
Well, the Thalia is in use all the time, but not for movies. We're going to be showing movies there this summer. So they're still capable of showing movies.
What do they do there?
They do everything from, they do the Met Live, they do poetry readings, they're a different kind of cultural center.
Yeah.
And so they use that space for a wide variety of things. The physical seats in the Thalia were torn out years ago. It's no longer fixed seating. It's more like
The old seats.
like this, yeah.
But they're so out of the way, you've got a much better location.
Yeah, they have an agenda it's another agenda needed in the neighborhood. It's just different. And, but film is not part of their agenda, except for when we bring it to them.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
You still offering the option to donate some money and get seats with your name on them?
That option will reappear. We had the one thing that's going to change is the price, because what we did was before December 31st, we had a sale on seats that could be named after you, and that sale kind of went about. So it's going to be more money. And we're going to probably do a promotion about that in the not too distant future. Yep.
Are you still planning to have programs for local school?
Yes, and that's exactly what Emily's working on. She's making those connections now that for things that we'll be able to do in the schools. But the hope is that eventually the education center within the theater will be used in that way. And by the way, that space, how many people that space is going to hold 49 people when it's in seated mode. It's going to have flexible seating. So that particular screening room so that it can be used in classroom mode or, whatever. But meetings like this is another part of what could be done. The whole idea is to make it a community center.
Are they going to have such thing as live performances other than what appears on the screen?
In a very
be foreign or
in a very modest way, there can be a live component to what we do where people, first of all, we can easily handle introductions, Q&As, all of that kind of stuff that you normally see in a lot of movie theaters. But could there be, somebody doing stand-up, or could there be somebody with a guitar, just one person on a guitar or something? The answer is probably yes, but there's not going to be a stage. We are already trying to squeeze a lot into this building. And the minute you have what you would need for live performances, real live performances in terms of the flies and wings and whatever, there's no way that we have enough space for that. So we are dedicated as a cinema center. That is what we are.
The cafe, will it be possible for people to go to the cafe even if they don't want to go on the movie?
Yes, that is the exact idea, is to keep it open to the street,
Right.
hopefully spill onto the street during the summer, and to become a place where people congregate. It's good in both directions, because what we want is people walking in the doors so they can see what our programming is, they can get the vibe and see that this is going to be a really nice place to hang out and spend time. But it's also going to be good in the other direction, which is people who are coming in to see a movie can get a meal before they go in, or can congregate afterwards for drinks to talk about this incredible movie that they just saw.
Something that the museum world is really important. Cafe becomes its own destination, and that really helps to bring that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the Metrograph, which is a place downtown in Chinatown, for those of you who haven't been down there, and Adeline does some work with them. You know, they have made it a very big success to have that combination. Our version of this will be very different, because the difference between that neighborhood and this neighborhood, you know, we're very much dedicated to making this a place that is for the Upper West Side. We have no aspirations to make this Lincoln Center and make it into like a world-class venue that people all over the world are dying to get their movies into. We really want this to work for the neighborhood. And that means that that you are the audience, or at least part of the audience. You're not the whole audience.
I believe at the morning that took place, and where you were in, with the loss of the Plaza Cinema. And the thrill that I felt going for the first time to the new Plaza Cinema, even though it's not ideal, it fills a gap. And that was created by very loyal, dedicated Upper West Siders. And one of the things I love about it is Gary's talkback after the films. So I'm wondering two things, like, are you in connection with them at all? Do they see this as like, after all their hard work, you're going to take away their customers? And whether or not you would consider things like a talkback?
I mean, start with the last one, it's the easiest, which is, yes, of course, we're going to do talkbacks as often as possible. We have this idea that is a little bit unlike what we've seen in other places, but it was inspired more by what gets done at museums, which is to have senior citizens become docents for us, where we actually give them a program where they can see the movies and hear people like professors from Columbia do their spiel, and then have almost every screening at our complex be introduced by a senior citizen who will have learned about that movie and can talk about it. So that's one of the things that we've been talking about. I don't think that anybody else does that in the film world. They do it in museums all the time. As far as our connection to New Plaza Cinema, I know Gary, they know us, we know them. I approached them very early on about joining forces. They just are not very they're very risk averse. And they like what they're doing in its own modest way. And the fact that we're taking this leap of raising millions of dollars to create a new facility was something they just didn't have an appetite for. So will we work with them eventually? Maybe. The truth is there's room for both of us, because there's a huge gap between 68th Street and 100th Street, right? So, you know, there's no reason why we can't be playing movies that they play and vice versa. I can tell you that the folks at Lincoln Center are also really supportive of what we're doing, because they don't see us as competition either. There's, you know, here's a statistic that will blow your mind. Below 14th Street in Manhattan, there's over 25 full-time art film screens. Mm-hmm. And above 14th Street in Manhattan, there's exactly 3, and they're all at Lincoln Center. So, you know, there is a huge gap that needs to be filled. Okay. Last question?
Have you given any thought to recreating an ongoing summer festival of major art films like the Failure used to have in the summer?
You told me like their repertory program. Yeah, I used to go to those when I was a young person. I learned about the Marx Brothers, the failure, double features, different ones every day. That was the Metro's history. If you go back to the 1990s when Dan Talbot ran it, was that they did double features, different double features every single day. We have one screen that's out of our 5 that's going to be doing that on an ongoing basis. Not necessarily exactly that, but it's going to be something akin to that. Well, thank you all for your time.
So excited that we're getting it. Listening to the discussion about the Thalia reminds me, the Thalia is where I saw my first Buster Keaton movie in black and white with a live piano player. Never seen that. It's great. All right, I'm going to move us along. The next part of the program is my plug about the Block Association. What we do, why you should interact with us and be part of what we're doing, what we'd like to do. You have a new idea for something you'd like us to do that we could support, bring it on. So in the year since our last annual meeting, here's a quick recap of some of what we've accomplished. We've published 4 issues of our newsletter containing all kinds of topics, information, facts, restaurant reviews, such like that. I wanted to thank Amy Edelman, our graphic designer, Ariella Koblitz, who's not here tonight, Terrence Wave in the back, our ad manager, and also Eliza Lansdale, who's not here tonight. She's the one who picks up boxes of 2,000 newsletters and houses boxes of envelopes. And because of what she does, it winds up under every single door in the neighborhood. In the past year, we upped the ante on our neighborhood beautification efforts. For many years, we've been doing 2 times a year tree pit cleanups and plantings, which we did last year. The next one is scheduled for Sunday, May 4th, I believe. Is that right, Peter? So if you're inclined to get out and plant some plants. From 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. It'll be in front of 878 West End, I believe. Lend a hand. One of the most important things you can do once we do the planting is help with the watering. If you live in a building where you can grab a water bottle on your way out and pour it on the plants, if we have a dry spell like we've had in the last couple of summers, please do that. But in addition to the planting, we started a new project this year. Once a week, a team of people cleans up every street in Block Association territory. It's called Street Love. It was launched in connection with the Park to Park Open Streets Initiative, Shared Street Initiative. It's in partnership with the Columbus Amsterdam Business Improvement District. And thanks to Daniel Bernstein and his staff for all the help on that. It's collaborative with the Mount Sinai Treatment Center on 102nd Street. It's collaborative with Purple Circle. It's collaborative with a bunch of volunteers who often come and just start picking up trash. CB7 has participated. The Broadway Mall Association has participated. One of the volunteers who's been showing up lately is the guy who just took over the Indian restaurant right across the street. His name is Deep, and the restaurant is called Kasari. He's the nephew of the person who owned Angan before him. So it's a great project. Anybody want to venture a guess how much trash has been picked up in the past year? Aside, anybody want to venture a quantity? 2 tons. It's approximately 80 pounds of garbage every time the volunteers go around. Another thing that has happened recently is that we had to say goodbye to Ray Dooley, who managed the I keep calling it St. Luke's because that's what it was called when I first encountered it, but now it's Mount Sinai Treatment Center. He was the manager there for 38 years and has just retired. We said goodbye to him. It's going to be hard for whoever replaces him to demonstrate the commitment that he demonstrated to being part of the community. And it was such an important value to him that he made it part of the program that the residents participate. They did. So I hope his successor will do the same. We hosted a public meeting in February about the future of our streets, the upcoming demands on the curbs, like the side pickup sanitation trucks, like deliveries, drone deliveries from Amazon and other companies. Thank you, Gary, for having organized that and getting such a experienced panel of experts to talk to us. We had been working for years and years and years to get the sidewalk on the north side of 103rd Street fixed. It was terribly dangerous. It was opening a can of worms. It took years and years and years, but it is now fixed. In October, we hosted a very well-attended, very sad day in memory of Cynthia Doty, who was a board member for many, many years. She was so close to being a 50-year resident, but passed. And in October, the corner by her building was renamed in her honor, and a bench in Riverside Park was adopted in her name. And practically every politician who represents our area showed up at that and spoke movingly of Cynthia's contribution. Last June, we launched a new social event called Bloomingdale Bites. That was so popular that we did it again in November. Again, thanks to the Columbus Amsterdam bid for helping to make that happen, as well as the 104th Street Block Association and the American Youth Hostel. Neighborhood restaurants provided food. People came in and paid a modest fee to come and eat it. It accomplished giving exposure to the restaurants and bringing people who don't normally come together a chance to do so. When we redid it in the fall, we made it a trivia night, and it was highly competitive and very interesting, all about the history of the neighborhood. Throughout the year, we've continued to move further into the digital age. When I started paying attention to the Block Association, all our contributions were checks, and they were the little envelope stubs that we did our record keeping from were kept in a shoebox. We don't do that anymore. We are on the verge of introducing some sort of reminder, electronic reminder that your dues are due. We haven't put that together yet, but we're looking ahead to next year for working on that. But meanwhile, our website has more and more content all the time. We Zoom our meetings, we stream our meetings. We've created an archive of Block Association documents, minutes, agendas, other paperwork that used to only exist in filing cabinets is now all together in a Google Drive, and that is going to be made publicly available. What else? We are in the process of conducting a survey of the security cameras and other measures that are already in place in the neighborhood. Because we no longer fund a human being to walk around on the streets, we're trying to figure out what we could provide instead. There are so many buildings that have cameras already. We're thinking about, we're working on finding out where they are and who controls them and who has access to the footage. And our next step, once that data is collected, will be to analyze it and figure out whether there's a way to integrate it into an actual system and how we can cooperate with the precinct and actually make a security network out of it. We have just completed updating our bylaws, which hadn't been touched in this millennium. I have a few copies in little plastic folders over on the side if anybody cares to look at them. They are also available on our website. The biggest changes were to reflect that we now do live in a digital age and include language in there about meeting by Zoom or other electronic means and housing documents and archives and things like that. We also clarify some of our procedural stuff. In October and December, we hosted very well-attended Halloween and solstice caroling events. I'd like to thank Mary Chester-O'Cost, who's not here tonight, for putting together the Halloween extravaganza. And I can thank Anthony Bella. Who was here in person tonight for running our carol. Is it? 41 years.
Wow.
Along with his husband Dale Vandersand and his marvelous sister Roberta Balulovich. So thank you to that. Tonight we're looking ahead to our future goals. We're glad to have had the opportunity to introduce Micah. We're about to, in a few minutes, induct our newest member to our 50-year Hall of Fame. I'll introduce her shortly. She is the 46th person we have been able to identify and interview in the neighborhood who's lived here for 50 years or more. Shortly, we'll have our elections. We hope to add a new board member to our numbers. Debbie Getz is here. She has wonderful experience that is of tremendous value to us for creating a giant public event on the scale of our old yard sales and bazaars and things like that that we used to do. We've missed having that. We'd really like to get something up and running of that nature. We have some more administrative tasks to attend to. We're about to find out from the community what they like and what they hate about the shared street so we can take appropriate action. We intend to host a public forum about everybody's favorite topic, trash, and what we can do in the neighborhood and what's coming and how all that's going to work. Read the newsletter. I'm sure many of you already do, otherwise you wouldn't be sitting here. Join our email list if you haven't already. And we also post news of events on building bulletin boards. I'm going to turn the floor over to our treasurer, Gary Hack, who's going to say a few words about our previous year's finances and the budget for the coming year.
Going to be very brief. Looking at and hearing about numbers is not the right thing to be doing at this time of the evening. But what I want to say is that last year we had expenditures of about $30,000, thanks to the giving of a lot of people in this room, memberships that are contributed by many others. In addition to it, wonderful people who have sponsored our newsletter, almost completely sponsored by businesses within the neighborhood on it. And we exactly evened out our expenditures and our revenues last year. So we didn't have to draw down any on our rainy day fund that we try to keep in place. This coming year, we're probably going to have slightly larger expenditures because of the new things that we want to create this year, including the hope that we can do an event in the streets that focuses on food in one way or another, and also to carrying forward the findings of our study on the security cameras and how we might find the idea is to try to see whether we could work with the building managers and get some kind of coordination among all of these cameras that are already up on the streets and here. We are also this coming year, going to get liability insurance for the organization, because as we do more and more things in the streets, we run liabilities of something going wrong at one time or another. on it. So we're going to need slightly more money this year to do it. But hopefully, as we did last year, all of our donors will step up and will be able to come close to evening out on the expenses and the expenditures. Okay.
That was very brief. Yeah. Okay. My favorite part of the evening is to introduce to you our 46th person in the neighborhood who's lived here for 50 years or more, Patricia Parker. Will you stand? I had the pleasure of meeting Patricia in her apartment last week. Before last, I've interviewed all 46 of these people, and so many of them said to me pretty much what Patricia said, which is she came to New York to follow a dream, and her dream was a career in music. And she's done that with wonderful success. She was born and raised in North Carolina and earned her undergraduate degree in music from Converse College. By then, she had already been performing since she was 5 years old, so performance was not new to her. Converse College, which she attended, was at the time the oldest school of music for girls in the United States. It is no longer only a girls' school, and I believe it's been subsumed into a larger university.
Yes.
Yeah.
Converse University.
Yes.
I have nothing to do with it.
So noted. She then went on to Rochester's Eastman School of Music, graduated from there with a master's degree, and then found her way to New York City, where her plan was to launch a career in music and land an audition with the Metropolitan Opera. As so many people do, she took a day job as a receptionist at a law firm and squeezed in equity auditions before and after work. She learned a lot about the audition process, including how important it is to research the role that one is auditioning for and make sure to choose an appropriate selection for that audition. Obviously, what she learned was of tremendous use to her because of a fabulously successful career in music ensued. She's been a teacher at many prestigious academic institutions and a performer across the whole gamut of musical. She's been in the national touring company of Sweeney Todd, where she snagged one of 7 parts that were available to 400 candidates. She became friendly with Angela Lansbury in the process, in part because one day, waiting in the wings to go on stage, Miss Lansbury asked Patricia about what she did to warm up her voice before performing, and Patricia explained it, and Angela approved. She has performed in recitals at national and international venues. She's been a soloist with renowned orchestras. She's been in opera companies. She has television credits. She has film credits, including the 1982 version of Sweeney Todd, also with Angela Lansbury. While appearing in a Tennessee Williams play that I had never heard of, perhaps you have, A Perfect Analysis given by a parent, she met, in her words, a nice man. And she married Jonathan Morrison, sitting next to her 33 years ago, is that correct? 35 years.
We've been together 35 years.
Congratulations. In a few years, Jonathan will have lived in the neighborhood long enough that we can induct him into the Hall of Fame. Their careers, Jonathan, in addition to being an actor, is also a conductor, have taken them many places, including St. Petersburg, Russia, where they lived for 1 year. Although Patricia never did get to perform at the Met, she expressed no regrets. She used the word lucky over and over to describe how she feels about the direction her career took and how fortunate she was to work with as many important figures in the music world. George Balanchine, Hal Prince, George Hearn, and Stephen Sondheim are just a few. So I always wonder, how does somebody wind up in our neighborhood? And so often somebody knows somebody who knows somebody. She first moved into an apartment on West End and 104th Street, but it was too big for a single person to live in alone without roommates. So she gave it up. Didn't want roommates. And then a year later at Carnegie Hall, we all know how to get to Carnegie Hall, don't we? Practice. Somebody she knew who was also performing there mentioned that she lived in the Broadmoor and suggested that Patricia go and look, and she did, and she's been there ever since. Same apartment, all 50 years. When I asked Patricia about what she loves and sees as the same and different in the neighborhood, she applauds the great access we have to public transit, although she hates, as I do, that people steadfastly stand in the door of the subway, thinking it's hard to get home. Nobody likes that. She loves the sense of spaciousness in the neighborhood, that you walk out and you see sky. And we have a nice wide Broadway with the median. West End is wide. And both of those things have been the case since 1975 when she moved in. She loves that there are other musicians living in her building, but notes that there aren't as many now as there have been then. There are also now too many cars, she notices. Too few musicians, too many cars. She enjoys our area's proximity to all manner of arts events and museums, which she considers critical to her continuing education as an artist. As was true when she moved to New York 50 years ago, she loves that. I think I'm quoting you correctly. You can find every kind of human here. We may not agree on all things, but we're safe here in a way we might not be elsewhere. You can be anything you want to be here if you have the wherewithal to push through and do it as she has done. Thank you. Please join me in welcoming Patricia Parker to our resident.
Is there a question?
Patricia, I have for you.
The certificate suitable for friend.
Oh, I can come up with it. That's okay. I call this my two-gun poster. This is an elephant, which a few years ago, in 2023. Yeah, my left ventricle broke. And I don't know why. It's the lupus or I don't know. Anyway, Mount Sinai Park, 102nd on the east side, took care of me. So I'm alive. I'm very grateful to be alive and a wonderful partner who has stayed by me. And I still have this neighborhood. It's just, I remember when I first moved up here, my friend said to me, Pat, you can't move above 86th Street. You'll be dead. And I said, and y'all have been up there. It's wide open. It was beautiful. And, you know, I thank you all for this. And I wasn't going to say anything, and then Jonathan said to me, he said, you know, you've been here 50 years, you should call and tell them you've been here 50 years. So I've been here 50 years, I'm 79 years old, I'm still breathing, and I'm grateful to live in this neighborhood. I think it is a special place, absolutely a special place. So, thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. I have a few more acknowledgements to make. There are several other 50-year Hall of Famers here. Shelley Fine is one of them. Asia and Ted Berger are another two. I'm looking, I don't see. Is there anybody I'm missing? No, I don't think Dorothy is here. Another acknowledgement I'd like to make is Caitlin Hawk sitting way in the back. She runs our website. With grace and aplomb, no matter what kinds of silly things we say, Caitlin, can you do this? Caitlin, can you add that? Caitlin, we made a mistake and you do your work all over again. The next item on our agenda is the election of our board of directors. At the bottom of the agenda, you will see a list of 10 names. Those are the people who have indicated that they would like to run for the board. Our habit is to vote by acclamation, where we accept the whole slate as one. Thank you, Shelley. So moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Anthony. All those in favor of accepting the slate as printed at the bottom of the agenda, please raise your hand or placard or. Sure. I would be happy to. Except that I just buried it in my pile of paper. There it is.
Yeah, there's 6 people.
Yeah. The 10 names on our slate are Hetty Campbell, that's me. Mary Chestaro Koss, who runs our Halloween party. Amy Edelman. Peter Frischhoff. Debbie Getz is our newest candidate. Gary Hack, our current co-treasurer. Celia Knight, our current recording secretary. Ginger Leaf, who could not be here today. Richard Robbins, who I affectionately call the AV Squad. And Ethan Stein, the other co-treasurer who is not here this evening. All those in favor? Any opposed?
There are 6 people on Zoom, but I think we had enough votes that even if they all were to vote against, we'd be okay.
I think so.
And I'm not, so I think we got approval.
Yes, there are 20-something people in the room. If you want to record their votes.
I just don't know which ones of them are eligible to vote.
So you will check. Okay. If you want to write down their names and we can check it after, please do.
Is there anyone on Zoom who really wants to be recorded as voting? If now you can type your vote in chat, but it will not affect the election.
I have a few closing remarks. Before I do that, does anybody have any questions? Yes.
I would just like to comment.
Well, thank you, Shelley. I appreciate that. It's the thing I like doing the least that I do. In addition to thanking Michael Lasher for having come and spoken to us, and Ira Deutschman and Beth Krieger and tell me the person for making the Upper West Side Cinema a reality. I'd like to thank Caitlin again. I would also like to thank all of our board members for devoting their time to our community. I'd like to thank everybody who volunteers to do anything, whether it's a one-shot, I can help you for an hour, or I can deliver a newsletter 4 times a year. those little bits of help really go a long way. If you are not someone who volunteers and have a little time and have a little interest and don't mind a little effort, we would be glad for your help. Keep in touch with us, please, either through email or by attending events or letting us know what you're interested in so we can pay attention to it best we can. Because representing the community is what we're here for. We take that role very seriously. Thank you all.
Thank you.